this is something which I think he regards as something as a really good thing to get behind and something to really fight for. And it's something he's been very interested in for a while. I mean, I probably shouldn't mention it, but there's a bit in Harry's memoir in Spare where he talks about him and Prince William fighting over who got to do climate. It's Prince William saying, "I gave you the veterans, the elephants and the rhinos are mine." Which, I suppose speaks to the sort of rivalry and whatnot. But it is something that he's clearly been very focused on.
And indeed, it's not just UN delegates that are flooding the streets of New York, but also the Prince and Princess of Wales are there to announce the finalists of the Earthshot Prize, a contest that William founded that seeks to reward innovations which may help to save the planet. I wonder how he's going to take the government's announcement today of sort of pulling back on net zero targets. But I wonder, you've been following them around. What's been the general kind of messaging there?
Yes, well, it's just the Prince of Wales, but it has been that the Prince of Wales is very impatient to see people trying to solve the climate crisis. So, I mean, he started this thing, the Earthshot Prize, in 2020, and it was very much modelled on JFK's moonshot and the sort of idea that if we try and do something really hard, we'll sort of foster all this new innovation. And it was this very sort of hopeful idea that we could innovate to save the planet, essentially. So they give $1 million to 5 companies or sort of programs each year that are doing something helpful. And so that was, I mean, he was on stage at the Plaza in a big ballroom surrounded by sort of, people like Mike Bloomberg, and Bill Gates was there. And although we didn't have high hopes for a speech from him, he did a sort of Q&A where he spoke seemingly off the cuff and without notes about his passion for this, and he did seem very passionate. And he also told us he'd been for a jog in Central Park, which raised a lot of eyebrows. So yeah, it was. I think the palace will regard it as a very successful trip.
He's also said that he's impatient to scale up prizes from the competition. I wonder if there's any standouts amongst the finalists.
Well, there's some interesting ones. I mean, the British ones, which I sort of focused on initially, were that there's a company that makes tires for electric cars. Now, I didn't realize, but tires apparently give off more air pollution now than tailpipes in many cases. And electric cars are worse because they're heavier and they've got heavy battery packs. So there's this British company that makes tires that give off less particulate matter when they run along the roads. So that was one of the finalists. There was another quite interesting company that was making dye. It was making natural dyes using DNA from the natural world to instruct microbes to produce colors for
Wow.
the dyeing of clothing. I thought that was pretty cool, actually, and that was a sort of that's the idea, was to save on all the chemicals you normally need to create sort of synthetic dyes. So there's a lot of quite interesting, there's reforestation programs, marine programs. There was a guy who had great big forests of seaweed off the eastern coast of Tasmania, which were to be fed to in supplements to cattle to stop them producing so much methane. And he was a sort of heavily bearded man. He looked very appropriately sort of like he'd emerged from the sea himself.
Tasmanian, Poseidon-like.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Maybe we will be saved by ingenuity and tech after all. I mean, they're such good stories, these, aren't they? Because they just are so much more forward-looking than a lot of the more negative stuff around climate change, of which there's been plenty here today. But I know Prince William then met the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres to discuss COP28, which is a big diplomatic effort from the palace and also keeping up, I suppose, in many ways, the work of his father, the king.
Yes, I mean, he obviously he's quite cautious, Prince William, and he's slightly less political, I think, than the king. But this is something which I think he regards as something as a really good thing to get behind and something to really fight for. And it's something he's been very interested in for a while. I mean, I probably shouldn't mention it, but there's a bit in Harry's memoir in Spare where he talks about him and Prince William fighting over who got to do climate. It's Prince William saying, "I gave you the veterans, the elephants and the rhinos are mine." Which, I suppose speaks to the sort of rivalry and whatnot. But it is something that he's clearly been very focused on.